Hey folks, Graham here on a rainy morning here in Singapore in front of a very mundane car dealership to illustrate a point about storytelling and how storytelling changes our relationship with the world around us. Now, this car dealership set up by a Malaysian immigrant family here in Singapore, the Tans, very popular name here in Singapore. Now, Tan was a very successful businessman in Malaysia selling auto parts. His son set up this car dealership here in Singapore, very successful, one of Singapore's richest businessmen. They sent their son to Harvard Business School to study, came back from Harvard Business School ready to take over this car dealership, but he said he wanted to start his own business. So what business did he start? Not a car dealership, but he looked at his great-grandfather, who was a taxi driver in Malaysia, and he set up a taxi business, and that taxi business was Grab. Now, the reason I tell this story is, firstly, it helps us understand the backstory or the origin story of a brand and how important that is. When we think about the origin stories of brands, we think about Michael Dell in the garage, or Steve and Woz building the first Apple computer, for example. But here's the thing, when it comes to Asian brands, this is where they are traditionally weak. Because who the hell is Anthony Tan? Well, you've just heard the story perhaps for the first time. And it helps us relate to these brands. And increasingly, we're seeing what I call a storytelling gap. And that is, in this age where companies are increasingly building data sets of billions of customers and they're not advertising, what's happening is these brands aren't telling stories about themselves anymore because they don't need to find customers. So they're not using stories to find customers because they know who their customers are already. And that's the problem, is now they've lost the skill of telling stories. So if you think about this, for example, Huawei, who the hell is the founder of Huawei? But we all know who Steve Jobs is, and think about how that origin story shapes our relationship with Apple and iPhones. Yet my question to you is, would Huawei be so easily bullied by the American government if they had a strong founder story which they communicated clearly? So I believe that's a failure of Huawei communications, that they are not telling that story, and because of that they become a faceless IT company, making them an easy target when political turmoil happens. So telling stories is not just about acquiring customers, but it's also about helping people understand who you are and where you fit into the world.